Cloud. Boom. Welcome to the Masterclass here. This is the Thanksgiving edition. It's November 23rd, Tuesday in 2021. We've got Kyle Lopes, who I'm going to feature here presently. I'm going to pin Kyle. Hey, there he is. I guess I should co-pin for a little while while I'm introducing him. I know we'll have some more joining us here in the next few moments here. I've invited to those that joined us earlier to prepare questions here for Kyle. If you saw Paige Weber's masterclass from 2 weeks ago, either live or the recording, it's available on YouTube now. Check the Facebook group or email me, tbooth@cutco.com, so we could send you the link so you can watch the Paige Weber masterclass. We did something a little different with that masterclass. Paige has got tons of content that she could dive into and tons of slideshows and notes that she can present. And we decided in almost real time and even in advance to not present that. We decided instead to take a few questions and do a deep dive. And we wound up spending about 45 minutes on the post interview, which is something that you would never try for SLC. And yet it was robust, meaningful, awesome. In fact, even if it wasn't program specific, the principles from there were something that could support people nationally, regardless of what division or even region that they're from. So that's my way of trying to set the table for today. The quality of masterclass today will probably be determined by the quality of the questions that the system here or our group is going to ask. I know that Kyle's always loaded for bear. He's not short on topics. He's not short on content. Kyle Lopes, welcome to the masterclass. I'm glad that you're here, man.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Trent. I'm excited to be here. And hello, everybody. Good morning.
So Kyle, let's get things kicked off here a little bit. It's not like your dream when you were going to Columbia was to run a district office. In fact, really, you'd kind of given the Heisman to the vector opportunity at DM level up until, was it 18 months ago? Maybe 20. So pandemic hits, right? You've been crushing Cutco sales for a long time. Career sales for you, Kyle, just personal sales. I'm sure you know what that's at right now. What's the career sales at?
Somewhere between 1.1 and 1.2 million.
So north of $1 million. You've been doing this for a long time. From what I understand, the most prolific college student sales rep in company history, and crushing it as a CSP. So DM isn't on your radar. All of a sudden it is. Can you walk us a little bit through some of that journey there? Would that be helpful?
Yeah. I really appreciated everything that I'd learned through Cutco. I'd appreciated the opportunity to sell Cutco through college and pay for college and do it on my own terms and with my own schedule. And then, as I was going to college, it was something where I had made a decision where I wanted to sort of look into and pursue other opportunities. And I'd had a chance to network through Cutco, through my relationships, meet a bunch of different people in different industries, and had interviewed for a couple of different positions. And then my last semester of college, the pandemic started and everything shut down, and all the job opportunities that I'd been offered were frozen for the time being. And this was what I'd always known. This is what I knew I was good at and comfortable with, not the management stuff, but just like selling Cutco. And yeah. I realized very early on, and like Mike and Dan and others, I told them pretty early on that, hey, I see a scenario in which like the CSP opportunity doesn't really exist this year. And since Cutco is all I know, and being a CSP and a sales rep is all I know, like I might potentially be interested in management. Maybe tell me a little bit about it and what we're doing. And Dave told me about it. Dan told me about it, and sort of the shifts that we were making to go virtual. And it was like, well, not really doing anything else with the pandemic looming, so I guess I'll go ahead and give it a shot.
I love this story. What's interesting is that Dave Powders and I get weekly calls, and so I got to hear about just some of this in real time as it was developing. He's like, man, if we can get Kyle to open an office. And it's interesting, you were saying CSP opportunity. It's amazing you had the foresight to think maybe just this year. We didn't know in 2020 if it would come back at all, or if it would come back, how long it would take to be able to come back. So if we fast forward, then you decide to start running an office. I mean, and you're going through the learning cycle all over again. All right. So you've basically come to a level of mastery at so many different ways of selling Cutco, personal, in-home events. Now all of a sudden you've got to learn the interview. You've got to learn training to a certain extent, even if you're not running it yourself. Can you walk us through some of those first few days as you're like, man, I'm putting this together. I'm trying to figure out how can I be awesome there and here?
Yeah, those first few weeks were really tumultuous because there were so many moving parts. When I made the decision in April to go ahead and give it a shot for the summertime and just be a branch, I was still living in New York City. I was still wrapping up my final semester of school. Obviously, being in New York, I was at the epicenter of everything that was going on initially. And so I was trying to figure out, like, all right, well, how do I get out of New York City? Because I don't want to be stuck here if they happen to quarantine the area. And then where would I go? And then on top of that, like you were saying, Trent, like just learning all the aspects of being a manager. The last time I ran an interview, I think was like 7 years ago for Mike's office.
Wow.
And everything was way different, obviously. And so the whole structure of the interview is different. Learning Apex, I had no idea what Apex was, or remote interviews or anything like that. The virtual training, like I I had to relearn Vector Live. Like there was just so many aspects of it that were novel to me, and that was really challenging. And then just trying to enlist help as well. And I think that was really the biggest area that I did well. Was I realized that there was so much I didn't know, and if I was going to have any chance at running a halfway decent program over the summertime, I needed to enlist some help. And so I reached out to everybody in my network, everybody who used to sell Cutco, even if they sold Cutco like 6 years ago or 7 years ago. I was like, hey, like pandemic's coming up here. You probably don't have anything going on this summer. Like, want to just hop on for the ride. And so I got a few people to enlist and help me with that. And that was a really big help for us, because there was a lot that I didn't know and a lot of catch up I had to do.
Man, can you walk us through that moment where you go from uncertainty, I don't know that this will work, I trust and believe in myself, from I don't know to like, oh, dude, this could be good. Like at some point you went from like, hey, I'm in New York, things are crazy, to like, oh no, we're gonna rip this.
Um, Probably 2.5 or 3 months into the summertime was when I saw like, oh, this might actually be working out well. And we had a few weeks where we were doing like 40K, 40K, 50K. And then there was a week where we did, I think, like 73K. And we were the number one office, and the second place office was at like 52K. And I was like, okay, like we're actually doing something pretty sick right now. And that was sort of where things dropped in. And I was like, all right, like we might actually have a chance at winning a silver cup. And then when the fall started, again, my perception of the opportunity from my years working here was, okay, fall recruiting is not going to be very good. Everybody's going to go back to school, but this fall is going to be different because people were going to be at home, and they might still be looking for stuff. And so we just really pounded the virtual pavement and made sure that we recruited a bunch of people. And even then, Callie, our right-hand person, I was like, yeah, I hope that we do like a couple $100,000 for the fall. Like $100,000 is a big fall. It's President's Banquet. And she was like, no, like we're hitting $1 million. Like we're doing over 400 grand in the fall, which has never been done before. And I'm like, you're crazy. And sure enough, we were able to pull it off, which is pretty awesome.
I mean, that's something. So like you've got people that are helping to buoy you and your confidence. I mean, clearly you're attracting people that are kind of game changers. Um, but wow, to ship $1 million from a standstill start, right? And then starting as a branch and then continuing on as a district that fall. Kyle, if you were to say, hey, there are 2 to 3 things, could you narrow it down even to 2 to 3 things that helped you to hammer through the say 8 to 12 weeks where it wasn't hitting, and then all of a sudden it clicked? And one of the things I'd like you to talk about is I'm wondering if work ethic is going to be one of those things, because I've come under fire. I've had some people question when I set you up at SLC. I asked you to publish how many hours you work, and having had a number of calls with you over the last year or so, I'm aware of what your schedule looks like, your actual real schedule. So I'm asking you to do the deep dive in one, two or three of the things that are really led to you guys getting lift off and then sustaining that, and then speaking to work ethic if that's not one of the two to three.
Sure. Yeah, I would say I think the first thing is just making the commitment. And that sort of ties into the work ethic, but just the commitment to be here. And the idea that like if I'm gonna do something, like I should probably just really do it. I think that so much of our lives, we spend so much time tiptoeing and things. And I still find myself doing this where like I will physically show up, but I won't really mentally and like spiritually be there. And I conflate the idea that like, oh, because I'm just here personally, like I'm doing the work, I'm putting in the time, I'm experiencing the growth. And the realization that like I need to be a lot more present and intentional about what I'm doing with the hours of my life and not just showing up to things, but like really showing up to things, I think was really important. And so with this branch opportunity, it was, hey, there's nothing else going on. And the mentality for me was the pandemic's not going to last forever. And this is going to be an opportunity for people. They're either going to seize the opportunity or they won't seize the opportunity. And when the pandemic is over, whether it's in 6 months or a year and a half, people are going to reflect on this time, this opportunity that existed for people to just focus on something and really improve themselves. And they're going to go back and go, did I seize that opportunity or was it a missed opportunity in my life? We're only going to get this one time. And so that was the mentality that I had. And it's the mentality that I've maintained even as we start to emerge from it. It's like there's still so much opportunity right now for people to really dive into something with their whole heart, all of their energy, and make sure that they are reaping the most from that experience. So that was the first thing for me, was just the commitment, that mentality of just, if I'm going to do something, I'm going to do it with everything I've got. The second thing was just making sure that no matter what happened, I didn't lose sight of what the purpose of the management position was, which was impacting people. And in speaking with Dan, who is like my third dad, one thing that I've always talked about with Dan was my vision to enter public policy at some point and impact people on a really, really large scale. And Dan does this through his work here and through his podcast. And it was something where, in speaking with Dan and sort of figuring out, like, is this something that I want to do? He said, what better opportunity do you have right now to impact hundreds of people at this current state of your life? And it was like, that makes a lot of sense to me. If I go and I work in tech in an AE position, maybe I'm impacting like 20 or 25 people. And here I get the opportunity to now, like, since we've opened, impact over 1,000 and the ripple effects of that. Right. And so that was something that I also kept in mind, was whether things went really well or really poorly or somewhere in the middle, it wasn't about the money. It was about the impact, and it was about the creation of the legacy that I wanted to leave on the people that I touched here, as well as the people that just know me through the Cutco vector sphere. And then, I think the last thing was really, like you were saying, Trent, just the work ethic. And just for me, the biggest life hack, I tell this to all of our representatives when they're new, is having a Google Calendar and making sure that all of the various things in my life go into my Google Calendar, so that way nothing falls through the cracks. I've had some issues with concussions over the years from hockey, and it's been something where my memory isn't as good as it was before. And what causes a lot of stress or anxiety for me is when I have 5 million different things to do and I'm trying to remember to do all those different things. And if I can take the whole remembering part out of it and just write it down, put it in my calendar, segment when I'm going to do those specific tasks, that makes my life so much easier, because now I wake up every single day, instead of having to figure out what I'm going to do that day, I already have my roadmap. I already have my game plan for the day. And now I just wake up and execute.
So I want to go a little deeper on this here, Kyle, because I think one of the questions people here would want to ask, and if you have specific questions that I'm missing here, friends, please drop them in the chat here for us. And I love that J. Brad Britton, tongue in cheek, asks the favorite, most horrible question we could ask is, tell me your secrets to success. So let's make them specific. Let's aim small, miss small with the questions. So specifically, Kyle, how do you stay motivated for you, right? And what works for you may not work for everybody here, but again, people might miss you the fact that 2 to 3 months, this thing did not hit. It's not like you opened up and the Superman S on your chest and just started cranking from day one. There was latency, right? Before this actually lifted, right? It was not hitting, and you kept jamming. Um, and I'm assuming that these answers are probably still going to be in this answer, but we're just looking to tease this out a little bit because anybody can do anything for 4 weeks. But dude, you're at the midway point of the grind and it hasn't lifted off. What is it about that commitment, or how do you remind yourself of that commitment and the opportunity to impact people to fuel that work ethic?
Oh, so I think that it's two different questions. It's like, how did I stay motivated at the beginning? And then how do I maintain that motivation now? I think are the two sort of underlying questions. To answer the first one, how did I maintain motivation when things didn't look like they were going the direction that I wanted them to go? It was just vision, and focus on the long-term game plan and understanding that, me being an athlete, I recognized from my previous experience being an athlete, did I want to become the best right away? Yes, 100%. But those of you that are athletes, this resonates with you. Like, you had to spend every single day going to practice and just hoping that you might see that small, minute, incremental growth. And if you saw even a little bit of improvement, then you felt good about the direction that you were moving. And so for me, I could see little improvements. I could see people starting to stick around. I could see people starting to build the culture that I wanted to foster. And while the sales report didn't necessarily reflect where I wanted to be, I could see the things starting to fall into place. And that gave me a lot of hope and a lot of rejuvenation when I was feeling really tired. The second thing was just going in with the right expectations. Those of you that were at SLC, or you heard my podcast with Dan, I think it was the second one, like just the startup mentality and recognizing that what we're doing here is a startup. And even now, with my office being open for a year and a half, it's still a startup. That's what startups are. And so understanding and going in with the idea of like, cool, I have to treat this like a startup if I want it to succeed. And coming from Silicon Valley Startup Central, that wasn't a hard mentality for me to drop into, because it's what a lot of people do. And if they don't commit to the process fully, well, then they sink a lot of time and a lot of money into it, and it ultimately fails. And I was just committed to not letting this be a failing experience. And so that was how I stayed motivated. That's how I stayed motivated originally, was like committing to the process early on, having the right expectations. And then once I saw the small gains, really focusing on those and not focusing on all the areas of deficiency, but rather the areas where we were doing the right things. And that allowed me to really get that second wind whenever I was feeling really tired, whenever I didn't want to wake up early, whenever I didn't want to stay up late doing PCs with some of my representatives. It was those times where they had a really big sale after something I just taught them, and they felt great, and I got them committed to coming to the key staff meeting on Sunday. Those little wins, that's what propelled me throughout the summer. And then ultimately the little wins add up to the big ones. Nowadays, how do I stay motivated? That is actually something that I still struggle with. And that's something that I still work on. And I think that one thing that young people, myself included, I'm talking about millennials and Gen Z, we have been raised with this idea from our parents and our communities that, oh, if you don't love something, or if something's hard, or if something's challenging and you feel uncomfortable, you should quit. Like, I cannot tell you how many times my mom tried to get me to quit this job my first few years working here. Even when I was having success in the sales rep position, I cannot tell you how many times I had a rep earlier this morning who I was on the phone with, who was like, oh, well, like, I don't know if my parents like this job, and like, I don't think this is right for me. And it's like, okay, like, they're like, yeah, like, I want to come back later when I have better time management skills. Great. How do you think you're going to build those time management skills? Do you think you're just going to somehow acquire those over the next 5 or 10 years? No, you do things that make you practice time management. That's how you develop time management skills. Where do you think you're going to do that? At your like 9 to 5 job where you work part-time, they just tell you when to show up and clock in and clock out, or somewhere where you actually have to manage your own time? And that rep, after a lengthy conversation this morning, was like, okay, I see the bigger picture. I'll try it out. And those are the types of conversations that I have to have frequently with people, because we've been wrongly conditioned, in my opinion, to believe that if it's easy, that's what we want to do. If it's fun, that's what we should do. It's not always going to be fun. Your parents don't always go to work every single day and have a great time doing what they're doing. They go because it fulfills outside needs. It pays for the mortgage. It pays for food. It pays to go on vacations. It's a job. That's what it is. And so recognize that like what we do here is a job and it's not always going to be fun. And we want to latch on to the fact that we have way more fun experiences in this job than most people have in their jobs. And that's why it's worth it here. Outside of the income, outside of the personal growth, like this job's so much more fun than a lot of other jobs we're doing.
Kyle, I'm hearing a lot of deep conviction in the product, and I know that this is one of your secrets to success in selling a ton of Cutco over the years was obviously product conviction. Your product was Cutco as a rep. I hear a lot of deep conviction in the rep position here, and it'd be easy. I'm just highlighting this for everybody to make sure you catch that. You know, the objection is, hey, I don't know if this is for me. Kyle's like, not surprised, which is fun, right? Because Kyle's like, of course, your parents don't want you to do this, of course. Of course, you want to come back later when you've got some more skills. Where else would you get those skills? So, I mean, at some point, obviously, people have left your organization. Not all 1,000 people are still there, but to have the conviction to fight for this person, to keep them here for them. I mean, clearly, you guys are going to hit your goals with or without this individual rep, but the fact that you've got the conviction to go through that for her. I love here, Kyle, because you're talking about the startup mentality, and I'm pretty certain that not everybody on this or watching later would understand or be able to unpack that accordion file of all the things that go with the startup mentality. You've hit one of them right now, which is impacting people and being able to help people grow. I think is one of the things we're looking for. What would you say are some of the hallmarks of a startup mentality?
I think there's a lot. I think that a startup mentality, there's so many different factors that go into what a successful startup needs. I think the first thing is a successful startup needs a good product or a good service. We already have that. And most startups, they have a vision, but they're not able to bring that to fruition. And that is a big reason why they don't succeed. And so we can take solace and we can take a lot of confidence in the fact that we already know that we have a great product and great service and a great clientele. And so that's the biggest question mark for startups is like, are they fulfilling a need in the market? And we are. The second thing then that you need to look at is what's your level of commitment and are you committed for the long term? Those of you that are on this call right now, you are either sales managers or you're district managers, right? There aren't any branches on right now because it's the fall, and so you're committed to the long term, or at least you said that you were committed when you opened your office. And again, I just want you to think about those that are here or listening later on, like when you committed to this, did you really commit? Did you really think about what that commitment meant? When I was chatting with Dan and Dave about, hey, going district, the idea with going district was that it wasn't going to be 6 months or a year. It was going to be 3 years. That was the idea. And then we were going to reevaluate. And so it was committing to a longer term vision and recognizing that it's not always going to be roses for the entire 3 years. In fact, a lot of it probably won't feel very rosy, but that's part of the commitment to the process and the commitment to the timeline. I think the other thing is just like the belief in where you're ultimately going, right? So you have the commitment and it's like, hey, once I make a commitment, once I make a promise to people that I respect, I'm going to live in integrity with that promise. And I'm not going to pull back on that. I'm not going to pull the rug out from people and say, hey, psych, I know I've been here for a year, but I'm actually going to go peace out and go work somewhere else. Like you've made a commitment and you're conditioning how you live your life in integrity. And if you live your life not out of integrity. And so for me, like I made this commitment, this is the commitment that I've made to people, and whether another opportunity presents itself, whether things aren't going well or not, like I've committed to this process. And then the other thing is, now that I've made that commitment, what's my level of conviction and belief in myself and where we're going? And I shared at SLC, the recency of the MailChimp founders having sold their company for $12 billion to Intuit just a couple of weeks prior to SLC. And they had created and bootstrapped this company from the ground up in Atlanta, just the two of them. And it took them 20 years to realize this vision. 20 years. And so, and I think they sold it for, it was $12 billion. And so, you know, recognizing that the startup mentality is the long-term game plan. It's what the business is going to become in the long term, what you're going to be able to grow in the long term, the impact you're going to have in the long term, and also that the financial rewards and stuff, those tend to be at the end of the rainbow. You're not going to find the pot of gold in the middle of the rainbow.
This is great here. I've got so many nuggets, and I know people are dropping in the chat. That startup mentality, the concept of having that great product or service. Again, we tend to take it for granted, but I love moments like this where you can pause and go, dude, this product is so great. It totally holds up. It really does. But a product is not just Cutco. I believe that the Cutco of knives is the vector of student work. I mean, this is the opportunity, the premier opportunity there, and that deep conviction and commitment to that. Also, commitment to the timeline. I'm hoping that's in everybody's notes here. The idea of delayed gratification. You didn't use those words specifically, but you described a commitment to the long term. And even within that, I think all of us would go, yeah, I'm committed to the long term, but does that really mean that you're willing to slog through the weeds and the mud and the mire for this amount of time? In fact, instead of being surprised by that, going, oh, this is where it's hard. So it's a bit of a shift there that I could see for you. And you said commitment to the promise and to the vision. So Jim Rohn used to say, when the promise is clear, the price is easy. And I guess I'm curious, Kyle, because this leads to one of the questions here that Johnny St. Pierre is asking, is how do we continually touch that future vision, like that promise of what's coming? How do we keep that in the present when all the stress of the to-do list that's never exhausted, that's never even completed? How do we press those things out and keep the promise in the fore? What are some hacks that you've been successful with it in terms of keeping the promise clear for you?
I think the first thing, to be totally honest with everybody, is recognizing that it's not always going to be super clear. And like I mentioned just a couple minutes ago, like there are a lot of times, Stu and Callie can vouch for this because I live with them, that like there's a lot of time where I'm just pissed in the kitchen, or like I'm like, I had a conversation that didn't go well and the rep was just being a flat out idiot. And I was like, I am so frustrated right now. And it's in those moments, like there is no light at the end of the tunnel. I'm not in the moment going like, oh yeah, let me remind myself of my North Star. Like I'm a human being and I'm agitated that this person didn't listen to me and I wasn't able to influence them. And the long nights, the early mornings, like there's a lot of times where I wake up and I do it because it's my job. And it's not because I necessarily am super amped to do it or I'm super focused on my long-term vision. And so recognize again that like with any job, there's going to be aspects of the job that you don't thoroughly enjoy. And that's okay because it's the job. And with that being said, once I've come to that realization that like, it's not always going to be great. I'm not always going to feel like I'm on purpose. I'm not always going to be able to remind myself in the moment that I'm on purpose because I'm a human being. I experience emotions. Then I can start to focus on, well, like what are my longer term goals? And I've spent a lot of time, invested a lot of money on like my personal growth and development and trying to get really clear on what is it that I want to do with my life? What is it that really motivates me and drives me? And that wasn't always clear for me. Even when I was in the CSP position and I was hitting large numbers, like I had no idea what I wanted to do with my long-term purpose. And I think a lot of people still are searching for that. And that's okay, right? Like I'm almost 28 now. And I think I have a pretty good grasp on what I want to do with my life, but there are still set parts that come in where I'm like, maybe not. Maybe like this will be a totally different direction than what I think. And so instead, we need to also focus on the short-term gains. And I think that's something that a lot of people lose sight on. They're like, oh my gosh, because I don't know what I want to do with my whole life right now, and I don't have it all figured out at 18 years old, I should just quit and do nothing. Where does that make any sense? And yet I hear my reps when they're trying to leave, they say this all the time. Like, oh, well, this doesn't really align with like what I want to do for my life. Great. What do you want to do for your life? Well, I don't know yet. Then how do you know that this doesn't help you? And what are you going to do instead that's going to help you with your long-term vision if you don't even know what your long-term vision is? And just putting the fire back under the receipts, so that people are so used to being coddled and just being like, oh, you don't feel like this is for you? Okay, no problem. No, like I'm going to push people to be better because nobody else in their environment does. And so for me, I'm focused on a lot of short-term goals because especially until recently when my longer term vision dropped in, I didn't have a long-term vision. And so how do you stay motivated? You focus on short-term goals. For me, it was like, I want to graduate from college debt-free. That was a short-term vision. It was 2-3 years. It wasn't 20 or 30 or 40 years. And then it was like, I want to create a really large network of people. And that way I have a really large network to tap into. And there's a lot of different job opportunities that exist for me when I start to explore their opportunities. It was, I want to make sure that I have a lot saved up so I can start to invest. I can start to, Stu and I, we partnered, we bought our first house, and it became like the Cutco, brain trust factory here. And so that was something that was a vision for me. And it was a shorter term goal. I want to save up enough money so I can buy my first real estate property and start to invest in real estate. And I, wanted to save up enough money so I could start to invest in things that were a little bit more speculative, like cryptocurrency or a pre-IPO in a company that I'm really excited about. And so these are shorter term goals that I have. And even you could go even more micro than that. Like I want to save up enough money so I can take my significant other on a nice vacation, or I can take them to a really nice dinner for their birthday or their anniversary. Like you can get to those levels of micro, and those can be your motivating factors. It doesn't always have to be like, oh, I wake up every single day and I'm driven towards my 50-year purpose. And just recognize that a lot of the small wins will lead to the long-term ones.
Love that you've got both here, Kyle. I've seen the quote before that somebody on a mission doesn't need to be motivated. There's an underpinning motivation to what they're doing if they have that long-term vision. And I would second what you're saying and affirm that we need to have both. I mean, we've got to have those short-term things to keep us going towards the long. And if we've not spent enough time there, again, that the more I share this, I've been sharing it for 28 years. When the promise is clear, the price is easy. It works the other way too. And when the promise is not clear, that price gets hard. Doesn't mean it's impossible. It certainly doesn't mean we should stop. We talk about that a lot with the decision train and having our actions align with our commitments or our mission, if you will, and not necessarily our feelings there. This is really outstanding here. So to connect to the mission, I guess following up here then, one of the questions here again is given how much you work, long days, weeks / hours, ever burn out, or how to avoid it? Obviously, it's a pretty personal question there, so I'll let you decide on how much there you want to rage into here. But I think everybody on this call has worked and felt like, dude, I'm flamed at one time or another, and we're probably not done.
Yeah. I mean, I'm happy to answer any of these questions as honestly and vulnerably as possible. So for me, burnout has definitely been a real thing. And burnout is not a new thing to me, I think is one thing that I want to share. Like, sometimes within Cutco, I get the feeling or the sentiment that as though people feel burnt out here and they're like, oh, like it's Cutco's fault or like it's Vector's fault. Like I've been burnt out since like high school. Like I get burnt out because I was playing sports and I was trying to juggle relationships and I was trying to get a 4.0 and I was trying to apply for colleges. And like I was burnt out at 16 and 17 and 18 years old. And then I went and played semi-pro hockey and I tried to do this on the side. And I was burnt out all the time because I was trying to figure out how to pay my rent each month. And then I went to college and then I was burnt out because I was trying to figure out how to juggle college and this. And then I went to school in New York City and now I'm like suffering from imposter syndrome and I'm burnt out all the time because I'm in the library till 3 or 4 a.m. trying to keep up with every other kid who went to a prep school growing up. Like I've been burnt out at many different times in my whole life. And so the realization that like I'm going to go through times of burnout, and there's always this graphic that pops up in my head. I was sharing this last night with one of our sales managers, the graphic of the person who's hammering away looking the pickaxe for the diamonds, and they get sick like right before the tail end and they turn away. and the other person's coming with a bunch of fervor and they're going to get to the diamonds. And it's just those points of the greatest resistance, those points of the burnout, those points where it's like, I can't do this anymore. Like, I don't see, I'm in the tunnel and there's no light anywhere around me and the situation is looking bleak. It's those moments that tend to happen right before the breakthrough. And for me, it's like, great, the burnout is temporary. I'm a human being. And this idea that like, I'm going to somehow spend all of my energy, like, no, I go to bed, I wake up, I have more energy. I'm a human being. That's how it works. If I don't have any more energy, then I'm dead. And so like, I'm going to burn out for a little while and then I'm going to get rejuvenated, or I'm going to go do something that's fun for me. Like, playing hockey. I'm on two different hockey teams here in town, and the hockey teams suck, but it's a good outlet for me to be able to go and play, even if we get absolutely stomped. And so it's a good outlet for me to go and play for a couple times a week and like just get outside of this for a couple of hours. I just had an opportunity to go on a personal growth immersion in Guatemala for a little over a week, and I came back on, I think it was Tuesday, and that was really good for me to be able to step outside of this sphere and take a 360 view of what I'm doing with my life and sort of the trajectory of my life. And like, am I still on purpose? Am I still moving in the right direction? And just get really good clarity there, and also come back with a reinvigoration as far as like, great, I still do feel on purpose. I still do feel like I'm doing the right things. And so now I am rejuvenated because I'm reminded that I am moving in the right direction. And I think that it's important for us to take ourselves outside of this container periodically and just go back and look at it and be like, great, if I wasn't doing this, what else would I be doing? Would it be as fulfilling? Would it be as rewarding? And if the answers are no, then cool, I'm in the right spot right now. And that doesn't mean that this is going to be the right spot for me in 5 or 10 or 20 years, but it's the right spot for me right now. And that's all that matters.
So I'm hearing some answers like forced perspective, right? So, hey, how I feel is different than what's real, right? The fact that I'm feeling good is real, but the way I'm feeling might not be the whole story, right, is what I'm hearing there from you. And a forced perspective. And I'm curious to ask a little bit more about how you can get that perspective. But also things like rejuvenation, things like taking time out. And there's the example of the Guatemala, rejuvenation trip or retreat, if you will, which sounds like that was a little more extended, all the way through to I just need a nap. I'm tired, and if I get some sleep, I'll feel better. And I'm aware of how much you actually sleep. I don't know if we should publish that here. And again, I'm encouraging everybody here to take some of the principles without necessarily trying to be Kyle. Because I'm willing to bet if we were to look at any one of your weeks this summer, they're north of probably 75 hours. I'd actually be surprised if you average less than 80 hours a week over the summer. So I'm not necessarily advocating that all of you on this call should be necessarily doing that. Hear me right. Me celebrating the work ethic here, though, is to hold up that we could probably be doing a little more than what we're doing. And if we want to experience some of the success that Kyle is experiencing, we'd have to up our commitment. We'd have to up our work ethic, et cetera there. So Kyle, some thoughts there on anything in response to what I just shared there?
Yeah, I would say like, and this is a philosophy that Dan taught me when I was a newer representative. It's like, it's okay to go hard for a short period of time. That's why we have push periods. Just treat this like an elongated push period. That's what a startup is. And so it's okay to go really hard for a short period of time, and then take your foot off the gas. And so that's what I've done. Like, if you look at our recruiting numbers this fall, if you look at what our offices sold this fall, like, it's nothing crazy. Like, I've taken my foot off the gas, and I'm totally fine in saying that, because I've created something now where me having my foot off the gas still means that we're hitting results that leave us in the top 2, 3, 4 every single week. And so I'm okay with realizing that I've put in the work for the first year and a half. I've built what I wanted to build so far. Am I done building? No, but I'm content with where we are right now, to where I can like take a little bit of a breather because I've earned it. And if you look at my schedule now, I still have a lot going on. I still have a lot going on each week. I'm still working and actively doing office stuff, but like, there have been a lot of days this fall where I used to work Saturdays and I'm just like, yeah, my staff's got it this Saturday. And I just didn't show up, and we went rafting or something. And it's those types of things that I feel like I've put in the effort early on, and I've earned now the opportunity to give myself that space and give myself that time. and allow myself to have a little bit more balanced schedule, because I put in so much work and energy initially to get things to where they can start to run a little bit more autonomously.
It's helpful, and I celebrate the fact, Kyle, that you've taken the foot off the gas a little bit. And I also appreciate you explaining that and dialing in what that means specifically, because you're like, that means a Saturday. you might not work a Saturday. Some people are like, I'm in the office in November, so there's taking the foot off the gas, and then there's slowing the pace enough. It comes to mind, my son was pretty excited because he ran a mile. I said, well, how fast? He goes, 6 minutes. I'm like, dude. He's like, but yeah, that I couldn't run the second mile. I was like, well, okay, maybe we slow up to 8 minutes, right? Maybe we slow down to 8 minute pace and you can run two. Maybe. Well, we try that a little bit. And actually, you'll get more distance covered. And if that's our goal, is to get more distance, we might just have to pace ourselves a little more, right? So I appreciate what you're saying there too about it's okay to go hard for a while. And I'm celebrating that partially because Dan Cassette is one of my original mentors as well. And I heard him talking about this in the mid 90s there. It's okay to go hard for a while. And when I need to take a rest, I'll take a rest. And I also love that rest in and of itself isn't the goal. It's not retirement. It's so that I can rejuvenate, so I can get back in there and keep going. But you're describing selective competition. Selective competition when you're slowing down a little bit. I'm going to take a Saturday off so I can do this for a little while longer. Because in all frankness, if you're working 80-hour weeks for a year and a half, I don't think you're here. I don't think any of us are here. I don't know that we're wired to be able to do that year round, but it is appropriate for us to ramp up during certain seasons. And again, one of the things I'm hearing here from that startup mentality is it's a longer cycle than most of us are used to. A startup cycle, I would guess, Kyle, you're probably still in startup mode. I'm gonna guess inside of 10 years. What's the math on that, Kyle?
Yeah,
3 to 5 anyway, right?
my mentality is like a startup is going to be 3 to 5 years minimum.
And that's just to get out of like the red zone. I got to hammer every day. Now, if I don't show up, it will go, right?
Right, exactly. So just again, the recognizing, and I don't want that to come off as something that's demoralizing for anybody, by the way. Like, it's important for us to recognize as young entrepreneurs that sometimes like things are made to appear to be easier than they actually are. And there are people out there like the Jockos and the Gary V's that, regardless of whether you enjoy their candor, they are honest and they're real about the grind that it took to get where they are. And that's important because that paints the right expectations.
I'm glad you're sharing that. And I too celebrate Gary Vee, for example, who's saying that it's the grind, work. You're in your 20s, you got all kinds of energy, go work. And I love also the mentality that I'm going to grind in my 20s so I don't have to grind in my 40s. Like, I'm going to pay the price right now because, dude, I got energy, no wife, no kids, I can put all of my energy into this, and this is worth it, frankly. This is good. This is good stuff. Kyle, I'm going to go back to some of the questions here. Just make sure that I'm covering. Anna asked a great question earlier. She was asking, would love to ask you about how you tie people into your vision and actively build the culture in your organization through that vision. And I would recognize that you're doing, boy, so much better right now than even a year ago or even before the summer of leading through other people in your organization. And yet, still like a startup, you are breathing most of the oxygen into your organization. How are you tying people in and actively building the culture in your organization?
So I think that there are a couple of different things that I try to do. I think the first thing is I try to get them connected with what's their vision. And I think that's important for us is if we help enough people, actually, this might even be a Danism. If you help enough people get what they want, you're going to ultimately get what you want. Right. And so the idea that I want to help people and identify with people on my team, like a zigism, that's right. And a zigism that I learned from Dan and attributed to a Danism, because that's the only place I've ever heard from about Zig Ziglar is from Dan. So I would say, it's important to help people recognize like what is it that they want and help them hear it, help them identify what is that greater purpose. And if they're not clear on that, cool. What a great opportunity that we have to be a life coach. I think that in management here, we're not managing in a tech company. Like, I want to be super clear about the difference between management here and management elsewhere. If you are an AE and you manage somewhere else and you run SDRs, you're just making sure they hit quota. That's it.
SDRs and AE for the uninitiated. Me, I don't know what an AE is, and I don't know what SDRs are. I worked here for 28 years. I'm sorry. What is that?
So if you work at any tech company that's a larger tech company, you have the AE, the account executive. That's what we are essentially. And then you have the SDRs, the sales development representatives. And those are the people that pound the pavement. Those are the people that make the cold calls. Those are people that schedule all the appointments, the sales reps. And the account executive is the one that goes in and does the closing typically, and is the one that actually meets with the clients and closes the deals. And so with your SDRs, like, they're cold calling for hundreds and hundreds of people every single day. It can be a drain. And it's this idea of like, cool, I'm going to do this right at like Google, for example. You come in, if you don't have any tech experience, you come in as an SDR and you're going to be there for a year and a half. And then you'll move up to an AE role. And so recognize that in those types of positions as AEs, they're super focused on just quota. It's all results oriented. And there's not a lot of opportunity there to like teach people and help them grow into better human beings and help them identify their long-term goals and objectives and get them really aligned and on focus with that. And so with this job, we actually get the opportunity to be a life coach. And that's pretty cool because I feel like that's more impactful. And so with what I do with my reps is I try to figure out like, why do you want to be here? And again, if they can't connect it to a long-term, lifelong mission, great. In the short term, why do you want to be here? Why is this a good place for you? And that way, when they feel those moments of demotivation, stress, burnout, whatever it might be, I can then reconnect them to that shorter term goal. And that's important because that helps them stay on path. And then once people realize, okay, like, this is a good place for me to be, I then want to enroll them in the larger picture of this is why this is a good project for us. And I don't want them to feel as though they are working towards my goals or my missions or my dreams and helping me build my empire. I want them feeling like we are building our empire. And that's really important to make people feel like they are along for the ride and they're not just a cog in the machine. And I feel like I've done a really good job of that with the people in my organization, making sure that they recognize that they are worth so much more than the CPO or the PRs that they have, that they are worth a immeasurable amount of CPO because their impact as a human being and their impact as far as their personal growth and what they're going to, the impression they're going to leave on our organization cannot be, could not ever be attributed to a certain dollar amount of CPO. They're that important to the mission. And that really keeps them tied in because when they're going through a lot of personal stuff and it'd be much easier for them to just quit. They are like, no, people count on me. Kyle counts on me. I'm helping to build something bigger here.
Let that sit for a second here. You were worth more than the CPO and the PRs, and actually dialing into what it is that they want. If anybody wants to do the deep dive on that, that is Zig Ziglar. I think even Andrew or Dale Carnegie, I think, even if you go way, way back. But if you help enough people get what they want, you eventually get what you want. But what's key here is I think in the 90s, we used to dress it up under a thinly veiled, like, hey, I'm going to get what I want by kind of helping you, but it seemed more manipulative. What I think needs to happen today is really, truly be sold out to their benefit and to their well-being and how they're doing and what they're going for. Trying to connect their day-to-day mundaneness, like just setting up appointments, to the big picture of equipping them for their big D dream, connecting the skills that they're gaining here. We talked about time management earlier, for example, to being able to do that successfully down the road in your chosen career or whatever it is that you're looking to do. Connecting their why right now to their bigger whys can pull them through even when you're not there. Kyle, I'm curious, at what point pragmatically do you start to dial in with them in terms of what their big D dreams are or why they're here? Is this something that is in PCs? Does it happen as early as the interview? And if it does happen, how do you track it from person to person? Is it just in that beautiful brain, or is there other ways that you try to make sure you've got that written down somewhere?
Yeah, a great question. First off, I would say, like I said earlier, definitely not up here because I would forget 100%. So everything is written down. Everything I do, I try to take diligent notes on as best as I can. We have a lot of structure here. I keep notes on all of our previous key staff talks because I will 100% forget. And then I will say the exact same thing or ask the exact same question I've asked them before. And nothing is more of a turnoff to somebody than when you ask them the same question 6 times because you couldn't remember what the answer was, or you didn't care enough to write it down to not ask them the same question again. And so one of the ways that I respect my people is by making sure that I write down their answers if I'm not going to be able to remember them. So that way I'm not asking the same question 5 million times. Really quick, before I dive into the pragmatism of it, Trent, and sort of where I'm identifying it, I do also just want to add on one last thing to the last thing we were talking about, which is in life, there's a few different stages as far as relationships go. And just the way that you view relationships and goals and objectives, you could view it as a zero-sum game, which is like there's a winner and there's a loser, and there's only so many pieces to the pie. And so one person, like, you can only divvy it up so many different ways. And so you could have relationships with people where it's like, I win and you lose. And I think that unfortunately, a lot of people operate their lives that way. I win, you lose. Then we could have the relationship that you alluded to a little bit, Trent, which is like, I win, you sort of win, which is what a lot of managers that I've noticed here and other places sort of operate on. Is like, oh, like they're achieving some benefit, so it tries to make them feel better. The third type of relationship is like, you win, I lose. And that's the one that's like super altruistic. We give them everything, we give them all of our time, and then we find out that we're broke at the end and we have nothing to show for it. But we can take solace in the fact that they win and they feel really good. And the optimum relationship that we all want to strive for is we all win together. And so that is the mentality that I want to try and cultivate here and that I try to live by. Is that doesn't mean that there's going to be situations where like they win more than me or I win more than them, but overall collectively, like I want us all to win equally. So I just wanted to make that one note. So as far as where do I keep track of this and where do I identify what their goals are, that starts in the interview. We have a question in our post interview that's like, how do you see working with us helping you in the future? And a lot of people talk about their school and their academics. A lot of people talk about their personal growth, their communication skills, and we write this stuff down. We save it in their Vector Live. And it's important for me to save this in their Vector Live for 2 reasons. One, I want to then move it to their web PDI when they launch. So that way I can remember what was it for them when they were in the interview and they were trying to get the job. What was the true reason and purpose that they shared? Because they were trying to impress you and they were trying to get the job and they were speaking from their heart in that moment, or they made up something really clever. And either way, I want to write that down, because when people then start to back down or start to try to back away or start to move away from the purpose, and in training, they're like, hey, Kyle, I don't know that I can do this. I want to then be able to leverage that. I want to be able to be like, hey, you said that you wanted to work on your communication skills. So you're afraid to talk to people on the phone? How do you think you're going to build those communication skills? And it's the moment of truth. Like, I'm not afraid to poke people with a sharp stick of truth. And that really helps me. And I realize that they don't see it in the moment, but it will help them later on. But it's important for me to flex my influence in that moment because I'm a better salesperson than they are. And so they're either going to sell me or I'm going to sell them. So that's the first thing. The second thing is, it happens in our, I call them PR PCs. A lot of other offices call them like day 4 PCs. But after training, after they've done their first couple of appointments, ideally, we connect, I clean their PR list and everything. And we also get them focused on what is their schedule and their goal for appointments this upcoming week for the remainder of their fast start. And then also, what is it like? What are they excited about? How are they feeling from their first appointments? Like, how can we then spin this to help them get a little bit better perspective on how this is helping them, not just to make money, but to really grow as a human being? I ran a key staff meeting this past Sunday, and I asked people, like, what are they grateful for, right? Good theme for Thanksgiving. And people, some of the people were like, I'm really grateful for the fact that when I come to these key staff meetings, I'm not just learning how to make more money. I'm learning how to be a better person. And that helps me make more money. And so for me, that's the focus. And that's the way that I try to cultivate our managers' questions here is, can we make sure that we are always helping people grow? Because when people feel like they're growing and they're improving, even if it's minute, even if it's incremental, there is a level of, I guess you call addiction to that feeling. And people want to be in environments where they can feel that they are growing.
That sounds like a super healthy addiction, like addicted to runner's high. I feel good when I run, so I'm going to keep running. And I'm growing, so I want to keep growing. And I also want to pay tribute here once again to Dan Cassetta, who I'm sure also learned it from Jay Brad Britton. But the idea of a meaningful, robust key staff meeting could be one of the greatest, not only retention tools for your reps, but also for your TLA, et cetera. You want to develop more people, make sure they're growing. And I know that Dan always kept that as a preeminent meeting for himself each week. It was really an event. And I asked Dan Cassetta in 1995 for the goods. I said, send me the stuff. That means that he actually went and photocopied all those talks, all that key staff. It was all analog, not digital, actual sheets of paper where he had all of his key staff content. And he asked that I would send more. So I was able to contribute to that library as well, even as a 21-year-old young district. But he also shared that with me back in the day. And it was something that he's had key staff talks at SLC over nationally, just to be able to make sure we continually make this work. And I want to shout out Angie McDougall has continued that tradition up in Canada as well. And I'm sure we're not alone. I'm not afraid to poke them with the sharp stick of truth, which is big. Because again, I think your intention has to be pure. So I'm just kind of highlighting here what I know to be true about Kyle. And I've seen you do this with reps that I've seen firsthand, and I'm a pretty big fan of one of your assistant managers right now. And I know how you are using that stick, not as a manipulation, not as a, but you want to do this. If you do just, you won't get it here. You're like, hey, this is the place where you can get that. And if you get into a place where you're aversion, right, oriented, and you're running away when the thing that you need and this activity would give that to you, and you're going to run from it, I like that you're giving them pause to consider what that would look like and what effect that could have outside of here. How do you see working here helping you in the future? So there's some really simple keys here. It sounds like that's a through line all the way, not just the first time that you're meeting them in the interview, but as you continue to work with them as well. Any other thoughts there, Kyle, before we move into one of the questions here, which is related to this?
Nothing comes to mind at the moment.
No problem. I'd be a terrible facilitator if I didn't double down and make sure, though, right? Because you've actually backtracked with that relationships piece. That was like, I would have missed that. I apologize. I'm glad we got it. I just wrote them down, the four of them, right? The zero sum game. I win, you lose, right? I win, you sort of win. That's really funny. And I think that's where a lot of us function in the company for a long time. And I think even if I wanted to be better, I think that's how I acted. Even if I wanted to be better than that when I was young in the business, I think I was susceptible to that. I think I've also done the I lose and you totally win, and I'm going to pour myself and empty myself. I'm going to bleed vector blue for you and not be left with anything. But I win, you win. And folks, if all you caught was this nugget and pressed into how we can create the real I win because you're winning. So I'm going to actually sell out to help you win, but not sell out to the point where I'm empty. I'm going to pour out. The question that Jordan Farber, thank you for posting this question, Jordan, by the way, and we're running close to the end of the runway here, but I'm going to ask Jordan's question. In fact, Jordan, I see you here. Can we unmute you and have you ask the question? Oh, that would be so much better. Add pin, unmute. Hello, Jordan.
Hello. All right, I can ask my question. Kyle, hello. Nice to see you here. You too, Trent. So my question is, how are you, Kyle, making sure that you're still constantly learning and leveling up yourself? Because I know, we see you at the top of the reports, right? Even last year, it's like, oh my gosh, Kyle, right? So what is it that you're doing to make sure that you're constantly leveling up yourself? Is it reaching out to other people? Is it audios, podcasts, that kind of question? Does that make sense?
It does.
Okay.
Yeah. Hi, Jordan.
Hi.
Um, I think that there are a few different avenues that I go down. One, anytime Dan shares a douchka thing on Facebook, I'll read it because I'm like, oh, this is probably going to be really insightful. I think that, for me, listening to podcasts, but not just like Cutco related podcasts. Like I want to bring value to my people that isn't just like, hey, here's how to sell more sets. I want to bring, I talked about that intoxication that they have with their personal growth. That is because I am always trying to grow personally, so I have more content to give them. And it takes me a lot of time to sort of come up with the various things I'm teaching at our key staff meetings because I have to spend that time learning it myself. And so, for me, like listening to podcasts is super helpful and really valuable. Stu, actually, I don't know that I've ever listened to some or watched somebody who does a better job of just always consuming audible content. Whenever I walk into the other room, Stu always has a podcast going on, even when he's working on other things. So that's something that I'm trying to get better at. The other thing is just, I'm a part of some personal development groups, and I started paying for personal coaching through Cutco initially when I was 20 years old here with David Scoggins. And then I coached for a little while with Danny Perez for a year in 2016. It's when I won the Silver Cup. And then I started coaching with Epic Impact, which is now Abundant, in 2017 with Ben Skemper, who Dan interviewed on the Changing Lives podcast a little while ago. And, the monetary investment in my personal growth forces me to be more present, forces me to actually show up and actually pay attention because for me in my relationship with money, like it's something where like money is important to me. And when I spend a large chunk of it, I'm going to show up. And so I make sure that for all of my coaching calls that I pay for and our group coaching calls and stuff like that we have, that I'm really attentive for that and that I'm really locked in and dialed and focused because I want to make sure I get my money's worth. I want to make sure that I get all of the value that I can from these people that I really respect and trust in their wisdom. And then I can start to impart that on other people. So I pay for outside coaching. I have a whole like library of books behind me that I would like to get to in the near future. And then I also have newsletters. I would say the last thing where I consume a lot of content is I have a couple of newsletters that I subscribe to, New York Times and a couple of other ones from other entrepreneurs that I try to read as often as I can in my email inbox. They tend to be pretty short, pretty concise. It's like 5-10 minutes worth of reading, but I'm able to glean a lot of information on current events as well as things that might be happening that I might not even be aware of that aren't like headline news from the major outlets. And that's also helpful for me because then I can start to better understand the world and the changing environment that we live in.
Jordan, thanks for asking that question. I appreciate you. And we are open for a question or two more here before we close things out. I know people are already having to drop out for interviews, etc. I want to follow up here before we take the next question, and that would be Kyle's talking about going deeper and continuing to read. Had a mentor that would say, people can tell when you're not fresh, right? So you want to be fresh bread that they want to keep consuming, right? And they can tell when you're just trying to mortgage last year's book that you read. If you're not continually bombarding your mind with vitamins for the mind, if you will, then your people can tell. And one of the reasons, I think one of the motivations I'm seeing here with Kyle is I need to keep growing so that I can lead and help serve my people better. Another thought here, by the way, and I'd encourage you, all of us on this call here. Jake Kuhn once said it at a DVM meeting, and I've written it down. It's one of my favorite quotes by Jake Kuhn. He would say, just because you taught it doesn't mean they got it. And I say that because some of you on the call are like, well, I covered time management once at a key staff, so I guess that's off the board now. I'm like, no, no. In fact, I would encourage you to revisit even the same content, because the best 4 points from time management probably haven't changed since last time you gave that talk. Giving the same workshop again is valuable. I would just preface that with you people that have seen it before with, hey, folks, if you've mastered this, that's tremendous. The next time you hear this won't be me, you'll be teaching it. But pay attention this time, because there's a meta level and then there's what we're actually teaching, right? So there's ways that you could kind of, I don't want to call it recycle. I want to say that the only way we can get to mastery is to continually study some of the things that we want to press into and get good at, especially if it's something like the thinking game and trying to get our emotional intelligence leveled up. That's one of those things where just because you know the truth doesn't mean that you're functioning in it. There could be a gap between what you know to be true and what you're actually doing. So that's why it's important to be able to continue to put some of that in front of your people there as well. One quick note here about coaching. Strongly recommend coaching when the time is right. And I say this because this can be a bit of a sensitive topic in the company, right? I do see district managers that are young in the business, don't have I think a foundational level of sales under their belt and or savings, I would say, or even withholdings. And I see them signing up for 6-month contracts of $1,200 a month. I think this is egregious, and I frankly think that we should find a way to root that out of the company. That shouldn't be a thing. I'm a huge fan as a coach of providing a service for people, and I do believe that coaches should get paid, and they should get paid well. I think that there's a gap between somebody who really wants to reach for that brass ring, but they've not earned it yet. So Kyle talked about speculative stock. Before you start making speculative investments, he's got his foundation, he's got his emergency fund, or he's got a certain amount of cash, he's comfortable. So by the time he puts down the $2,500 into speculative stock, he doesn't care if he loses it. He's got house money, if you will. He's comfortable because he's got the base. Until you get to a base, and I would talk with your division manager or your region manager before you spend any more than $100 a call on coaching. Talk to your division manager, your region manager before you invest any more than that in anything, by the way, not just coaching. Before you spend $1,200 on a piece of art, talk to your DVM. Before you spend $1,200 on a weekend seminar, talk to your DVM, please, all right? That said, what can I do in the meantime? All the things we used to do before we had coaching. It wasn't a thing in the 90s. So what I do, I watched the VHS tapes. It's easier now than ever. You can actually just go to Vector Connect Library. You can also go on YouTube. TikTok delivers stuff like Gary Vee daily content that he put out today. Doesn't get any fresher than TikTok. Yes, the newsletters that he's talking about, or your favorite podcasts that come out, if it's not weekly, it's more than once. I would say journaling, because again, most of us don't have a knowledge problem, we have a behavior problem. So journaling, I'm asking myself the question, what do I know that I'm not doing? How can I close the gap between what I know I should be doing, what I'm actually doing? And this is something I know Kyle does as well. Listen, once you've got all this, you feel like, I've been through all the tapes, I've been through all the videos, I've journaled a ton. I am now ready because I've got a financial base. I've got withholdings at this level. In some regions, I'm hearing like, hey, once you got 20 grand saved, dude, you can coach with whoever you want. I like this mentality. This is good. Hey, here's our recommended list of coaches. Until then, don't short circuit. Any coaches with their salt are going to have you journal anyway. Might as well be great at that before you show up and start spending hundreds of dollars a call, right? Any case, there's also free options within our company, people that are just a little further up the road. Ask me how many dollars I've invested into Dan Cassetta, and he was one of my first mentors. The answer is zero. He would share stuff with me, right? It didn't cost anything to access Kyle here today. But before any of you ask for a call with Kyle in the future, or even in your region, you better have watched all of his videos. I'll say that again. You better master what he's already published before you ask him for a call. It's recorded somewhere, right? So master that stuff. By the way, if you've watched every piece of content he's got, I think Kyle Lopes should probably take a phone call with you. If for no other reason, you're going to be able to parrot back things that he already knows to be true, but maybe he's forgotten. His own genius will be mirroring it right back to him in that case here. Kyle, I'm going to come up for air here, brother, because I've done way too much talking that I'm comfortable with, but I definitely wanted to at least color in what's the process to start coaching? We don't want to just start there, folks. Most of us on the call here. But thoughts there, Kyle, on my rant?
Yeah, I think that you're spot on. And I would encourage those of you here and anyone listening later on, that the first thing that I realized after having been here for a little while was I could either go through everything on my own and I could go through all of the pitfalls and I could suffer and I could learn through my experience, or I could ask people who are further up the road as Trent put it, and I can ask them what their experiences were, people that I wanted to emulate, people where they are somewhere where I want to be. And I could just ask them, hey, what did you do? What did you experience? What were the pitfalls that you experienced? And I can speed up my learning curve and recognize that there are so many resources within Cutco and Vector that are available to you that are free. And so I definitely agree with that sentiment that before you start paying for coaching outside of Cutco and Vector, like make sure that you've gotten all of the coaching from inside Cutco and Vector that you possibly can, to where you, when you go and you start to interview coaches, and I think that's the other thing is like, make sure that you interview prospective coaches and not just pick the first one that tells you like, oh yeah, I'm going to help you do this. Like talk to a bunch of people, find the one that's the most aligned for you. Recognize that you've gotten everything from this environment that you possibly could have. So that way you're a lot more diligent about the actual coaching that you pay for, making sure that you're being taught stuff that you weren't able to just glean for free here, just by building better relationships and asking better questions and, being more intentional with who you're networking with. Because there's a lot that exists in this environment that you can access for free.
Great point here. I might even say it this way. Don't be lazy about your personal growth. I say it because some people say, if I throw money at it, I'll do it. I'm like, boy, you might not. If you're not journaling now, you might not, just because you're paying for a coach. And I say it because some of you have paid for a gym membership that you've also not gone to. just maybe. Don't be lazy with your growth. Engage, get the audios. I mean, it's something as simple as audios. Just go get the audios. Everything on from SLC is available on video. It's all on YouTube even. So do the work. And by the way, one of the best ways to network and upgrade your network is to be knowledgeable. Well, I watched Paige Weber network early in her career. She was reading up and voracious to learn from everybody around her. And then she was selling more. So people want to hang out with her. How do you level up your network? Is you continue to add value by developing yourself there. All right. It looks like we're going to wrap things up here, Kyle. I've taken a ton of your time here. I really appreciate you generously just offering this up here. And man, I want to give you the last word in just a moment here, but I first want to thank you here in a crazy week. I know a lot of people here are traveling, and there's a lot of things you could have done on a Tuesday afternoon. I want to thank you for generously investing into us, bringing the best version of you, for really authentically, genuinely, I might even say bravely daring to share just what is real about your struggle and how you've been crushing it still, but the fact that you've been wrestling to be able to get here. Final word is going to be yours here, Kyle, before I hit stop on the record, and then I'll linger for a few minutes before we all roll. But last word, Kyle Lopes.
I would just say that, I really appreciate those of you that are here and those of you that are going to spend the time listening to this recording later on, because I just want to acknowledge the fact that you're really committed to your personal growth, and a majority of people in our company will never watch this recording, and that's okay, because they're not going to be where you're going to be someday. And I encourage you to keep that habit up. And the other thing I would say is recognize that when something's scary and when something's uncomfortable, that's your body's nervous system telling you that, like, hey, I'm actively growing right now. And so if you're doing stuff on a daily basis that makes you uncomfortable, where there's some stress and there's some anxiety, like, stress is actually a good thing. Don't like stress yourself out to the point of gray hair, but like recognize that stress is a good thing. And when you're doing things that challenge you and push you and force you to get better, like, that's probably a good place for you to maintain and remain, because a lot of people think that if they take a step outside of their comfort zone, the analogy of ice skating, if you go ice skating one time and you fall down and then you stop and you just quit ice skating from then on, are you an ice skater now? No, you've got to do it many, many, many times. You've got to stay for prolonged periods outside of that comfort zone for you to actually enlarge your comfort zone. And now that area becomes comfortable. And now you actually can count that as growth. So just don't conflate the idea of, having listened to an audio or listened to a podcast or done something challenging one time with growth. You actually have to stay there for a prolonged period of time. And you're doing that by being here today. So I appreciate that.